Hi, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Preparing for Parent-Teacher Conferences and Promotion in Doubt. I am Liliana Diaz-Pedrosa. I'm here with our presenter, Kim Madden, who is our Director of Family Services. I will be managing the Q&A. I will pause the recording 1 second, and then we'll get started in a few minutes as people walk in.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Kim Madden. I'm the Director of Family Support from Advocates for Children. Today I'm going to be talking about preparing for parent-teacher conferences and promotion in doubt. Um, we're going to go through the promotion policy. When we're going through the promotion in doubt section, we'll go through promotion policy first, and then what it means for promotion in doubt. Okay, and just to start off with introductions, who is Advocates for Children? We're an independent agency that protects the rights of all New York City students. We have a helpline that's open Monday to Thursday, 10 to 4, and we have people on the line who are bilingual in English and Spanish, and we also have a language line so people can call in and who speak other languages. We have a ton of guides and resources, and also video recordings if you like to learn by video. Like the way today is being recorded, we have video recordings on many, many different topics. We also do workshops and trainings. And finally, we have a limited ability, but we do provide free legal services to low-income families. Okay, so parent-teacher conferences. This is the second batch of them. These are usually when it's more substantive about your child this time of year. Pre-K and elementary and District 1 through 32 is tomorrow in the afternoon and the evening. Middle school and D75 is next week, also in the afternoon and evening. And finally, in 2 weeks is the high school, District 1 through 32, and also schools that cover that, span grades, but also include high school. So K to 12 schools and 6 to 12 schools. March 20th is in the evening and March 21st is in the afternoon. Also, as any working parent knows, there's no school on some of these days. So you definitely want to be aware of that as well. Most schools have a sign-up system where you sign up in advance. Some schools you can just go. I think the number one tip that I got as a parent that I found helpful is you can go prepared, but really, really try to think of your top number one concern because these go really fast and they can get backed up, particularly when you get into middle school or high school and you're meeting with multiple teachers. Honestly, as a parent of a student with an IEP, sometimes I would just take that time to set another meeting with them to discuss things because I knew I needed to get more into depth. So it's not to say that it's like that at every school. In some schools, not that many parents come. It is a great opportunity where the teachers come prepared to talk about your children. And it's a nice way to also meet other parents if you don't know them. And to just get a sense of the school in general. This says they're 20 minutes in person or virtual. I think that was at one of my son's schools. It was more like 15 and really more like 10. So it was a speed conversation. But it should be discussing students' strengths and areas for improvement and a review of report cards, test scores, classwork. Also an opportunity to ask your child's teachers about any learning strategies. Preparing for a conference. Before the conference, you want to definitely prep for it like you would for, an important business type meeting or a meeting if you have a child with a disability, like you would for an IEP meeting. You want to make sure that you are looking at the work that your child is doing, asking your child what their perceptions are. That's obviously always really helpful. Checking the New York City school account, or NYCSA, it's called. If you don't have a login, I would encourage you to get one. There should be someone at your child's school who can help you log in. And you can see grades are posted in there. Every school has a different online grading platform, but just to make sure that you can try to check what's going on paper, make sure you have any questions lined up for the teachers, and think of things you want to tell the teacher. If you've noticed your child feeling really overwhelmed with homework in one subject, or that there's something going on at home that you think they ought to know about, this is an opportunity to let them know. During the conference, you want to, I know I mentioned this, but I think it bears repeating. Ask the most important questions first, because you may not have time to get through all the questions or thoughts you have. And definitely ask for help if you don't understand something, though. I think the teachers, it's a lot for them to go through so many different students. And sometimes they also are trying to get through a lot of information. So they might be speaking really fast or, using acronyms or assuming that you're understanding more about the material than you are. It's okay to slow someone down and say, could you just explain that? And make sure you let the child know what you're seeing at home. That's really important. It's a great opportunity for that. After the conference, it's always great to follow up with a note to the teacher on any questions or next steps. If they told you about an online tutoring program you could use, but you couldn't figure out how to log in, or they told you this would be a great thing to work on at home, make sure you're following up. And it's also nice to say thank you if they did give you some things to do. Talk to your child about what you learn. And schedule follow-up meetings if you need them. I think, as an experienced parent, I learned this was one of many tools that I needed to use to try to understand what was going on in my child's school. So some questions you might want to ask, and this is a list. I would also encourage you to look at the DOE's website. I'm not always positive about what the DOE does, but in this case, I think they have a really pretty good page on parent-teacher conferences with general questions. These are some general ideas because sometimes you can feel a little like, well, where do I start? These are some topics to think about for your child's abilities in skills. Sorry. Do you know what your child's strengths and weaknesses are? What are you seeing at home? What skills should your child be learning? That's really important to figure out, how are they working on something? What are they hoping to see? And also, of course, if you have any concerns. For grades and tests and homework, asking if your child is on level, how they're doing on homework and tests. Sometimes you get a lot of feedback from teachers and sometimes you don't. Also, a really important question is how much time should your child be spending on homework, and letting a school know. Sometimes they're surprised it's taking your child so long at home, and maybe you can brainstorm what's going on there. If your child has an IEP, maybe it's something where they can reduce some of the questions, or they can make it so that it's not taking as long, but your child is still learning. So I think this is a great opportunity to make sure they know what it's looking like on the home side of things. Behavior and participation. That's also something that what you see as a parent may be very different than how your child is in school. I always got great information from my child's teachers about who they were friends with and what they were like in class. So knowing what the teacher's perception of who your child is in class is really helpful. How they interact with other students. Finding out if the teacher has any concerns. Is your child never speaking up in class? Is your child always speaking up in class? Or, how are they doing with their friends? Teachers really do get a good sense of things. And also finally support at home to find out if they have any tips about what you could be doing at home to support your child. Okay, any questions so far? Can pause.
No questions at this point, but
Okay. Great. So we're going to talk about promotion. The DOE promotion policy for, changes over the course of your child's school career. In kindergarten through second grade, it's grade level standards. You can find these. I'm not sure actually if they're on the New York City DOE public schools website anymore. They should be. If not, they certainly are on the state education website. But it's basically that they're meeting the grade level standards for those grades. And promotion in kindergarten through second grade is up to the principal, but they have to be meeting with parents and teachers. So at this point in the school year, you definitely should have been having conversations about that. Obviously, parents who have concerns can ask about retention as well, or to ask about extra help. Third to eighth grade is the same. You have to be meeting the grade level standards. During these grades, there's also standardized tests if you don't opt out, that can, sometimes give you a sense in terms of how they're doing. If promotion is in doubt, the teacher creates a portfolio of work and the principal reviews it, and a superintendent must approve a holdover. In high school, you actually have to pass the courses. So you'll get a grade for courses. Many courses are year-long, so there's 2 semesters. And promotion is going to be based on the number of credits earned. So you have to earn a certain number of credits to be a freshman, to be a sophomore, to be a junior, and finally to graduate. There are some exceptions to this. Multilingual learners who are in US schools less than 2 years for grades 3 through 7, or less than 1 year in grade 8, are not held to the promotion policies for elementary and middle. They are for high school because you either pass or you don't. Students with disabilities who have modified promotion or alternate assessment on their IEPs can also be held to different promotion policies. We recently did a training with our partners at the Parent Training and Information Centers on New York State alternate assessment. And we have a new fact sheet that's on our website. We find that many parents don't realize that their child was on alternate assessment, or the conversation about it wasn't as detailed as it probably should have been. So it's really important, if you think that might be an issue, to look at your child's IEP. It's way buried towards the back. And you can see, standard assessment or alternate assessment. And you can also see if there's modified promotion. If there's modified promotion, I would really be asking, how far is your child from the standards, and trying to ask questions about that, because you don't want to find that your child has been promoted every year and then they go to high school and they can't pass anything, or that they're not reading anywhere close to on grade level. So it's important to keep an eye on things. Certainly, I think that retention is a really tricky thing and is not frequently successful. It often is pretty demoralizing to kids, especially as they get older. But that being said, being promoted without having somebody address your child's needs is also not helpful. So I remember one year when my son really needed tutoring, and I was asking for that because it was clear he was having some issues in reading comprehension. And in that same meeting, I think it was 4th or 5th grade, they wanted to modify his promotion, but they didn't want to give tutoring. And I was able to point out to them that really didn't make sense. It just completely contradicted. So we had a conversation that went up the chain, but they eventually gave the tutoring, and he was able to meet standards at that point. But it's something to really pay attention to the details with that if you have a child with an IEP. We have a lot of trainings and videos, video trainings and resources on our website to help support students with IEPs. Okay, so high school, this is what I was saying before with credits. You need to earn 8 credits to go from 9th to 10th grade. You need to earn 20 credits total to go from 10th to 11th, 4 in ELA and 4 in history. From 11th to 12th, you have to earn 30 credits. And for graduation, you need to earn 44 credits in the right subject. That's to just get promoted. Right now, there's still regents, although that is something that is currently being, it's changing. So they may be eliminating regents, or they are eliminating regents, but we're not exactly sure what's replacing them. So if you're in high school right now, stay tuned and pay attention is what I would say. Okay, so promotion notification. You should have already heard, parents are supposed to be told in the fall parent-teacher conferences if there's any doubts or concerns that could lead to promotion in doubt. I think at Advocates for Children, we see a mix of this. Some parents are told in the fall that there's concerns, and then some parents just get a letter in February and did not feel like they were told at all, or they weren't told. That's not how it's supposed to go. There's a very wordy but actually super detailed and helpful regulation on the from the New York City Schools Chancellor. It's called Regulation A501. And it's not a bad thing to read if you are worried about this. It's on the DOE's website, and it goes through all the steps and what they're supposed to do. So, you should have been told this should not be a surprise in February. But you are entitled to written notice by February 15th of promotion and doubt letters. Unlike some violations of regulations or law, if they don't give you written notice, it doesn't mean your child has to be promoted. It's just not what they were supposed to do. But it's a little tricky to say what consequences are there from that. That said, most schools are telling parents in pretty clear terms by now that your child may not be promoted. In May and June, the decisions about whether or not your child is going to summer school or being held over are issued. If your child is going to summer school, then in mid-August, there's promotion decisions. And in late August, and it's a pretty quick timeline, you can appeal. So your child would be going through summer school. At the end of summer school, the principal is going to be reviewing that. And then in late August, the superintendent, or they're going to tell you whether or not your child would be promoted. If you disagree, you can do a superintendent's appeal at that point. So one thing to keep in mind with, if your child is being told that their promotion is in doubt, which of course doesn't mean they're absolutely being held over, it's doubt, but it's not a good sign, is to try to break down what's going on. Is attendance a factor? Why? One of my least favorite experiences in my son's high school career was in 9th grade when he had ELA, which was always his hardest subject. And we knew that would be his hardest subject. He loved to read. He had some reading comprehension issues, but writing was really hard for him. So we knew it was going to be a tough year, but he worked super hard. And we were told that he would not be promoted. But one thing I found out the same week was that it was a 45-minute class, and he had been pulled out at least 15 minutes early from every single class to make the bus. Which they also weren't supposed to be doing, but it kind of thought you're missing a third of every single class and you're being told you're not being promoted. That's a real problem. And so we were able to address the transportation and get them to stop pulling him out early. In the past couple of years, they've finally addressed that in the guidance, not in reality necessarily, but at least in the guidance to say, hey, that's not okay. You don't have to choose between your academic or getting on the bus. You're supposed to get both. Also, of course, especially in high school, skipping school can be an issue. And as a parent, you might not know. But if attendance is a factor, whether or not that's something like in my child's case, he wasn't being marked absent. He was just missing class. But trying to make sure, are they actually in class? What's going on? And then, are they struggling in some classes more than others? That's really important, especially in elementary school, when you have one teacher and just trying to understand what's going on. That's often when, well, certainly for all of us, we're usually better in one subject than another. But if your child may have a learning disability, that's often when it's showing up. And especially in later elementary school, for somebody who's super bright, but might have a literacy disability or a dyscalculia, math disability, they might have been able to compensate in the younger grades and it might be falling apart. So trying to understand where do they need help and trying to understand what's going on with that. For students who do have IEPs, making sure they have the program and the supports on their IEP. I would also try to make sure, for example, if they're getting sets, one thing we discovered is my son's ELA teacher, SETS teacher, was not certified in that subject and really wasn't on top of the work. So that was an issue in terms of it was pretty hard for her to support him when she wasn't trained in it and she wasn't aware of what was going on in class. So sometimes it's not that your child isn't getting the supports, it's who they're getting it from isn't working. And so really, like, I'm saying that not to go back and say aha to the school, but to try to brainstorm with them about this may not be the best. Is there something else we can work out so that my child can learn? Schools don't often like being told they're doing something wrong, but they also most schools really do want your child to succeed. And so you can try to work with them to, see if you can brainstorm some way that they can get the right supports. Sometimes the IEP does need to get changed. It's not providing enough support. Okay. But along with that, if they're saying your child is not being promoted, schools are supposed to be providing extra help, whether it's academic behavior. They're supposed to look at, sorry, I'm going to click back to this slide. They're supposed to look at all of these different things, the attendance, the grade history, is it behavior, is it learning, is it some classes, not others, and figure out what support does a student need. If it's academic, they should be providing academic intervention services. And there's 3 different tiers of this. The first tier is core classroom instruction, but at that point, if your child's being, not keeping up, they probably need tier 2 or tier 3, where it's more targeted small group instruction or more intensive individual interventions. It can be AIS classes. It often looks very similar. I think I've been using SETS, and I apologize for that. It stands for Special Ed Teacher Support Services. And that's for students with IEPs, they can have a special education teacher who it helps them with the subject matter. But for students without IEPs, they also are entitled to, tutoring and academic help. And it can look pretty similar where they're getting small group instruction. Sometimes they could ask your child to come on Saturday programs. They might be providing at-risk sets. So it's this, a special ed teacher or speech. Sometimes speech, depending on the issue, speech therapists often work with some reading comprehension issues and some literacy issues. Finally, your child may need more specific kinds of tutoring. If your child has dyslexia, they may need very specific tutoring to help address that. For example, if your child has ADHD, they may need special tutoring or behavior plans. Oh, you know what? But I think this went out of order. Let me just go here first. There's also other academic supports, after school programs. These we're going to send the PowerPoint. I'm sorry if anybody has already asked this, but we will send the PowerPoint out afterwards to everyone who registered. And the after school programs, these are links that will take you to them. There's Compass and Beacon programs. There's also just out of school resources in general. You can try to find tutoring programs. New York Public Library has some tutoring programs, and Dial a Teacher is a service that can help with homework. For students where it's more of a behavior, all students are entitled to something called an FBA and a BIP. And basically the FBA is an assessment that helps figure out what's going on with the child, and the BIP is the behavior intervention plan to try to address that behavior. So first up, you obviously need the functional behavior assessment, and that, oh boy, this got out of order there. Okay, so the first up is the function. Why is the behavior occurring? The next step is the behavior. What behavior needs to change? And finally is the assessment. When does the behavior occur? Where is it occurring? How often and for how long? I had a student I was working with who everybody seemed to think the main issue was behavior. And he was suspended a lot I think he was in 4th grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, maybe in 4th grade. And he was doing things like throwing erasers at other kids, like talking loudly. He was kind of the class clown. And he was suspended to the psychologist's office at the school, and everyone really felt like, okay, we know what's going on with this kid. He just needs to hold it together. Um, but when they did a functional behavior assessment from someone outside the school, and this should have been pretty obvious, 90% of his behaviors occurred during writing, not during lunch and recess, which is typically when you see a dysregulated kid be acting out. It was during writing. And one of the things that we figured out, we also at the same time were getting him evaluation because he was super bright. He was always reading. They were not worried about his academics, is it turned out he was dyslexic, and he was very highly compensated dyslexic. He had memorized words rather because he couldn't figure out how to decode them. But by fourth grade, that started falling apart. There's only so many words you can memorize. And he was embarrassed, and he didn't want to, seem stupid in front of his peers. So he would act out in the class to get out of it. I don't think he really thought through all of this. It was just, how he was, but it was something that the combination of the evaluation and the FBA really gave us insight into what was going on with a student, especially when it seemed like a situation where everybody in the school had already decided, oh, this is what this kid is like. That's true for all of us, I would say, that if behavior is an issue, it's often good to get a fresh set of eyes because behavior doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens between people, typically. And making sure you have somebody who's more independent who can take a look at it, and really step back and analyze it can be extremely helpful. Um, then next up would be the behavior intervention plan. So first you're doing the FBA, the functional behavior assessment, which also includes classroom observations, evaluations, reports, and interviews. And then they come up with the behavior intervention plan, to, try to figure out how they can prevent the behavior from occurring, managing the behavior, and measuring progress. And I think also, maybe most importantly, believing that this child can change, and trying to, come up with strategies that can help. We've worked with students who have, really significant ADHD, had a really hard time sitting still in the typical classroom setting where if they were provided with two desks, and if they really needed to, it was okay for them to go take a break, leave the classroom, and go talk to, this one adult in the school who was close by. Like coming up with a plan that is addressing the behavior and also managing safety, is really, really important. And the student went from really not passing to doing extremely well because they were able to figure out how to creatively accommodate what was going on. All right, so I apologize for doing this. I'm going to go back to this slide, on summer school. So if your child is not promoted and you need to go to summer school, for K-8, summer school is now part of Summer Rising. And you're entitled to summer school, but to be able to go for the whole day, you also would want to apply to Summer Rising. And it just so happens we have a training on this next week, and the applications, I think, just came out today. So students in promotion and doubt status do get priority for Summer Rising. There's an academic portion of the day in the morning, and this is for grades 3 through 8. Kindergarten through second grade, it's not so clear that there's really as much of a summer school, although if the issue is maturity, you could probably talk to the school at the end of the summer if your child does get into summer school, Summer Rising, and see if they could reassess it. And in high school, it's different. But for grades 3 through 8, if you got into if you, need summer school, but you did not apply to Summer Rising, you can probably only stay for the academic part of the day. I think the days in summer school or Summer Rising are going to be longer again. Last year in middle school, they were shorter. I think it's going back to the 8 to 6. And that's obviously a huge boon for working parents to be able to have a safe place. And except I don't think it's Fridays, but there's a summer training next week where we'll go through these details. High school students, it's a little bit different. You go to make up that class at a different school. So if you failed ELA or US history, they will assign you to a high school where you can go and take that subject with a teacher in that subject to try to make up the credits. Okay, now I'm going to do that horrible thing where I scroll through. Okay, so recap. For the parent-teacher conferences, you do want to prepare questions, ask about homework and grades and classroom behavior, share concerns, like discussing any issues with special education needs, English language learners, or family circumstances, and following up, creating an action plan, and maintaining communication with the teachers. That last part is really important. I think if your child is not doing well, especially, it can be a lot to take on. And so, once you're figuring that out, first getting all your facts together, then talking with the teacher, and then most importantly, following up to make sure if you came up with a strategy that you're checking back in and seeing how it's going. Okay. That's it for our training. Please take our survey. We're going to launch a poll as well. And if you have any questions, this is a great time to let us know.
Kim, there is one question I'm in the middle of answering, but it's really about the consequences that a school might face if they fail to notify the parent regarding promotion and doubt.
I mean, I think there's not a clear answer to that question. I would say that it doesn't look good for a school. And if they're not notifying you in the fall, they're probably also not giving your child the extra support that they're entitled to. So I think that that's something, if you don't want your child held over, that certainly gives you something to argue about, and to say, you didn't give me notice, you didn't give extra help. And then I think what you'd have to say is, let's try intensive extra help now, not only summer school, but provide some sets or provide some speech or provide, an FBA, like you need to do this now, and to raise it in something that you might want to raise with the principal or with the superintendent at the end of the summer to say this was a problem. So I think, unfortunately, that's the only consequences.
And there was one more, and that is on translation and interpretation services at parent-teacher conferences. Are parents entitled to interpretation services at the conferences?
Yes, they are. You definitely want to ask in advance, but you should ask for, interpretation. Certainly, you should be getting any evaluations if that was relevant beforehand. But they should be providing professional interpreters, not asking you to have your other child, interpret. But you do need to give them some notice.
Thank you. I think at this point, I'm going to pause the recording. And thank you for those of us who are watching at a later time. And then we will continue with live questions. Thank you all.